The fifth state in the Union, but the first state in our hearts. The state of Connecticut has a long and storied history of success on and off the athletic fields, and 22 Threads is your go to apparel brand for all things CT. Visit the 22 Threads website at www.22threads.com to shop their stores and blue collar football apparel collections now. 10% of each item sold is donated to a local Connecticut nonprofit organization. Look good, do good, because you love CT. Okay, week one in the books, believe it or not. I feel like so much anticipation always for week one, and then it's gone on to the rest of the season.
Yeah,
So joining us to look back at last week and preview week two here is Jackson Mitchell. So Jackson, welcome back.
appreciate you having me back. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start. Take me through, kind of the highlights from that first game against NC State. Packed crowd at the Rent there. What was it like getting out on the field with this team for the first time?
It was good just to, obviously be able to finally get out there after a lot of practices and hard work and stuff. Obviously not the result we wanted, but I thought the crowd showed up, which is really important to us, and we're grateful for that. And we kind of feel like we'll let them down a little bit, but yeah, it was good to get out there and just for the first time with this year's 2023 Huskies for sure.
So, just kind of looking back at that game, you guys score on that opening drive there. What's it like just season underway? You guys are up 7-0 against NC State. I know it's way early in the game, but how's that, kind of early momentum feel, within the flow of a game?
Yeah, it felt good, obviously, and Coach Moore was kind of telling us as the defense go on the field, like we got to back it up now. Now that we're up 7-0, and obviously they went down and scored, and then after that it was kind of back and forth for a little bit. But just at that beginning it was good. The crowd was really into it. It got the crowd into it, and it was good to see the offense go down and score pretty easily on the first drive for sure.
From a defensive perspective, it seemed like it was really tough in dealing with bringing Armstrong, their quarterback, down, when he decided to become a little bit more mobile and get out of the pocket and run. What was it like from your perspective going up against a quarterback like that? Because I'm sure you'll see some others throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, we knew he was going to run a little bit. I don't think we expected him to kind of, he'd step back to pass, and if he didn't see one thing, he'd get tuck it and run right away. I don't know if we expected that, but something that we had to be able to adjust to. And now, obviously, that it's happened that first game, and we're probably going to see it a lot more often. And it's difficult at times, but we just have to work together as a defense. That's kind of where the defensive line and the linebackers and the guys in pass coverage all got to work together and know where their fits are, even coming out of the pass, and where their leverage is and where their help is. Whether you have the sideline or you have a guy dropping coverage inside you, where you can kind of pin the guy's hip and make the tackle and bring him down.
I know it's a very different NC State team from the team you guys saw last year, but they put up 41 points on you guys last year. This year only what, 24? So, were you able to see and feel some improvement? I know again some different players there, but again, going up against a really good high caliber team and being competitive throughout the game compared to what it was last year.
Yeah, there's definitely some good things to take away from it. Obviously, not what we expected as a defense, and not what we're capable of either. I think we definitely gave them a few points. I don't think 24 is what they really should have had. In that first game, I think we missed a lot of tackles, myself included, and we kind of gave them some points on some of those drives, and we messed up some things. But I think that's what we've worked on to improve on, because we have another tough team this week for sure.
What do you think are some of the keys to kind of cleaning up some of those missed tackles and some of the other, maybe mishaps that the defense might have had in that game?
Yeah, I think just like not, so they sped it up a little bit at times, and not kind of panicking or causing chaos when they speed it up, and going back to what we've practiced and what we practiced all week, going back to our training, I think a little bit. And then as far as the tackling, it's the first game, there's always going to be a few, but there was definitely way too many for our standard, definitely. And so that's something that we've worked on and practiced this week, and something that just has to be a really big focus. And you never kind of like take a break on it in practice when we have the pads on. You always make sure you're thudding up and have the good leverage and stepping into the tackle for sure.
So that game was on Thursday. Now, next game is this coming Saturday. So you have a few extra days here to prep. What's it been like this week since that first game leading up, now leading up to this game against Georgia State?
Yeah, I think that one like kind of hurt more for than like previous losses, I think, especially for this team because we had a lot of expectations in that first game. So that weekend after we kind of just, took a break, had some days off and like really reflected on what we want to be this year and what we want to improve on, what we have to improve on. And then obviously we got a chance to rest our body a little for those 2 days. And then this week we've kind of been going hard at it. We've had a couple hard practices so far this week already. We got one more tomorrow before like a walkthrough type on Friday before we leave. But yeah, we've just been working hard on cleaning up the things that we need to clean up and kind of upped our intensity a little bit. And Coach Moore is saying like a lot of people say like there's a lot of football left, but there's only 11 games, and maybe in basketball and other things, like you play a lot of games throughout the week. You only get one game a week in football, so you got to make the most of them for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious to dive into that a little bit more because I know you mentioned how you and the team kind of beat yourselves up a little bit more over this loss than in past. But still knowing that you have at least 11 games ahead of you and that it was the first. How do you balance that with not getting, maybe too down on yourselves and too hard on yourselves, for it being, the first game, the opener, you played a really tough opponent there in NC State and just kind of regrouping now for this, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think we now know like obviously how to prepare and what we need to do to prepare to not do that again. And then we know what our schedule is, and we see a lot of games that we can compete in. I think we can compete in all those games. That's just our mindset, and I think this is our chance to kind of go on a run and show what we're capable of as a team because we know we kind of already let one slip away, and we don't want to let any more for sure.
So take me through what prep has been like this week in advance of Georgia State, and maybe a few keys as to this game that you've been going through. Whether it's this week in practice or what you've seen on film.
Yeah, Georgia State. I mean, the first thing about their offense, they're very high tempo. So it's gonna be pretty warm down there too. Luckily, it's been warm this week, so we've been able to get outside and kind of get a little adapted to it. It's obviously not gonna be like Georgia, but
Yeah.
but we've been practicing really fast up tempo, especially on defense. The scout offense has been doing a good job of going up tempo and speeding it up. And so we can get set because obviously we got caught a few times in the previous game, not set, and the defensive line and the linebackers not set, not knowing what gaps they have at times. So that's something that we've really improved on. And then just the quarterback's a really talented player. I think he really knows where to go with the ball and he can use his legs too. He might not be as shifty as Armstrong, but he definitely can use his legs. And after watching last week's film, I'm sure that's something that they're going to use against us.
As you head towards this second game, I mean, one thing that caught my attention in this first game was Victor, not having any hangover from last year. He took off right where he left things off last year. What's it like
Yeah.
seeing him go out there and do what he was able to do? 2 touchdowns, including that really long run in the third quarter there.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And I think it's something that obviously we kind of expected just playing against him all camp and spring and in the summer, watching him work. And obviously that work paid off and I'm excited. I think that's just the start. I know, I was talking to like the offensive line and stuff. They were happy that like Vic kind of got off a little bit, but they felt also like they could get more out of the run game because they love to run the ball, that type of thing. And so I think we should expect more of that from not just Vic, but all the guys over there for sure.
you know, Obviously you always look at the quarterback as one of the leaders of this team. What have you seen from Joe this week and now prepping for a second game? Has that first game kind of under his belt now? He's starting to adjust a little bit more, having been a transfer and just coming in this year, now finally kind of getting some of those adjustments underway. So what are you expecting from him this week?
Yeah, I expect him and the entire offense to come out and kind of come out ablazing. I think Joe has that same confidence. He hasn't lost any confidence or anything, and I think they have high expectations for this week. They obviously saw what Rhode Island was able to do last week, and I think that gives them a lot of confidence. And I know they're doing some things that can help them this week. And I think I don't think they've lost any confidence or anything like that. I think they played a really good game, and the defense didn't really help them out at times. And I think we just got to work better together as a team, and I think we should be good this week.
As the team gets ready to head down to Georgia, I know it's a homecoming game for a number of guys on the
Yeah.
team. Is there a lot of added excitement heading down to Atlanta for this one?
Yeah, I think Ronte said it's the first game he's played in Atlanta since like 4 years ago. So obviously he's really excited. But there's a whole bunch of Georgia guys and just guys from the South in general. I know everybody's asking for tickets. It's hard to get everyone tickets. But guys like that aren't traveling or from up this way are trying to send them around. But I think it's really excited, and I know Ronte's really excited. You should expect like a really excited and big game from him because I know he wants to show out in front of all his family.
As you head towards, not only just week two, but the rest of the season, if there's, kind of a takeaway from that opening game or two that you think the team could improve upon to take it to the next step and, head towards those, lofty goals that you and the team are aspiring to, what are those things?
I would say just like discipline. I think we did some uncharacteristic things in the game that we hadn't done all camp or last season even. And just like not getting ahead of ourselves and not expecting, that we're just going to come out to win. We got to be disciplined on defense, knowing our gaps, knowing our assignments. Not taking a play off or anything, coming with effort, and then just as a whole, like not any penalties. Obviously, some questionable pass interference calls. I would say. Hurt us obviously on that one drive, and then two other penalties also hurt us that set them up for a touchdown. So just being more disciplined and understanding that everything matters and every blade of grass matters, and we can't just give away 3 yards.
So I'm just curious, as week one goes on with you playing Thursday, were you able to kind of sit back and watch some other college football action over the weekend, or are you just kind of fully deep diving into Georgia State and that's all you've been able to focus on?
No, yeah, I definitely watched some college football. It was nice on Saturday being able to watch some of the games, and then there was also a few big games Sunday and Monday also. That was cool, just college football being back and the excitement. I know everyone's talking about Colorado, but it was exciting weekend, yeah.
Yeah, and you got to take a little early look at that Duke team that'll be coming into the rent in a couple
Yeah,
weeks. So don't want to look too far ahead. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that one in a couple weeks. But another one
yeah,
that,
for sure.
that I think you know, to the what 25-30,000 that made it out the other day. That's another one to have circled on your calendar as one that's going to be
Yeah,
really
I think
exciting.
so. Should be. We got to take care of two first.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What's it like? I think, just having been to a number of games at the Rent, this is one of the bigger crowds I've seen in a while. What's it
Yeah.
like? And are you able to feel that difference playing for a crowd of that size compared to maybe some of the games in previous years during your time at UConn?
Yeah, it was definitely exciting. I mean, it was probably the biggest crowd I've played at in front of the Rent so far, and I've been here for 4.5 years, 5 years now. But yeah, it was exciting. You can definitely feel it, especially on those third downs. The student section was incredible to see all those students come out and support us. And I think that's why it kind of hurt us so much, just knowing like this is the first time the fans like came out in like full support. The stadium was packed out, and we kind of feel like we let them down a little bit. So that's why we're working so hard to kind of like make it up for them for sure.
As you head towards Georgia State on Saturday, I'm just curious to dive in, and I know people have asked me about this to throw this question your way, and I think I talked about it with Alex a little bit during the basketball season. But what's a road weekend like for you guys as you head down and kind of the schedule and day to day as you're down there on the road trip?
Yeah, so we get up Friday morning and we have meetings and we do like a up tempo walkthrough, I would say, and then we shower and we get right on the plane. And normally we would land when we land wherever we're at, we'd go right to the stadium and walk around the stadium, just get acclimated so we're not there the first time on game day.
Yeah.
Just see the locker room, see the field, get to feel the field, what kind of cleats we want to wear and stuff. Then we go to the hotel and we have team dinner, and then there'll be a chapel, and then there'll also be like meetings and stuff that night. Then we wake up in the morning, depending on obviously depends on the time of the game. We play at 7:30, so we'll have meetings and a walkthrough in the morning, and then we get some time off in the middle of the day where we can eat and then kind of just relax, maybe watch some football, watch some extra film, and then that team meal will kind of be around 3 something. You eat for a little bit, you get on the bus, and you get to the stadium like 2.5 hours early, and then from there it's game day. You kind of go out your warm up and run out
I,
there.
I don't think I asked you last year. What's your go-to pregame meal before you head out there?
I struggle eating before the games. If we play at night, I could probably get some breakfast in and maybe a sandwich at lunch, but that pregame meal is very slim, maybe like a piece of chicken and a few bites of some pasta, but I kind of struggle eating before the games, just nerves and
Yeah.
other stuff. But it doesn't seem to bother me during the
I'd probably be the same way. I'll wrap with this. You guys are on to week two, but for your Giants, it's going to be week one on
game.
Sunday. How are you feeling heading into this season?
I feel confident. I think a lot of people think, it was a fluke last year for the Giants, but I think they worked hard. They obviously got some good additions, and I think Daniel Jones, he just got paid, and I think it's going to show everyone why. So I'm excited for the. It's a divisional game too, so it'll be a good game for the first week.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, Jackson, I appreciate you taking some time before you guys head down to Georgia State, and
Appreciate
look forward to talking to you next week. Hopefully, off a win there.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm going to take a quick break from the interview to tell you about my friends at Martin Rosol's Meats. This fourth generation Connecticut family business produces kielbasa, hot dogs, sausages, and deli meats using Martin Rosol's very own original recipes. Their products can be found in grocery stores, delis, restaurants, and hot dog stands throughout the state. And if you're looking for your fill right away, check out their retail store in New Britain. For more information, visit martinroselsinc.com and go support a UConn fan-owned business. And now, back to the interview. All right, week 2 here for UConn football. They head south to Atlanta to face Georgia State. So joining me today to give us some insight into this team is Brady Weiler. He's a PantherTalk.com and Thursday Night podcast. He covers this team. So Brady, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Glad to talk some ball.
Yeah, so take me through. I mean, I know being up here in the Northeast, we were able to get a little bit of a preview of this Georgia State team last week playing up against our neighbors in Rhode Island. Give me some just high-level thoughts and takeaways from that game last week.
Yeah, so I guess the biggest story, or one of the biggest stories of the offseason, was that the defensive coordinator, since Sean Elliott has been head coach since 2017, Nate Fuqua, left in the middle of spring practice. He took co-DC outside linebackers coach job at Cincinnati. And it's actually the second spring in a row they've had to replace a coordinator in the middle of spring practice. So a little bit of a bad trend going on there. So they made the decision, because they were in the middle of spring, they weren't really going to be able to get an install going, that they were just going to hold off and hire a DC, get him in for the summer. And they ended up getting Chad Staggs, who had been the defensive coordinator at a Sunbelt rival, Coastal Carolina, the last 4 years. And so he didn't start installing his defense until the fall, which is very rare.
Yeah.
And Rhode Island had a good offense. Kasim Hill's 7-year senior, former power conference player at the FBS level, good receivers, good offensive line. And so that all combined together to where you had some coverage bust. You had some just like sloppiness from not really having the defense fully installed, to where Rhode Island had 11 explosive plays. And there were some that are just like, you can't have that ever happen, but it happened. The best thing you can say is they still got the win. The offense looked as good as you would hope for, with 3-year starter quarterback and Darren Granger coming back. The running game got going in the second half, busted a big explosive play. Defense made enough plays. They got 2 picks. One of them was a pick 6 for a touchdown. Got into the game as it got late. The fourth quarter, they started making some plays that maybe they weren't earlier in the game, but I think that there was some hope that they would avoid some of that. The scheme came in the fall, and they didn't really do that. And a experienced offense took advantage of that. And the old adage is that you get better, you get your best improvement from week 1 to week 2. And Georgia State's certainly going to need that to be the case, because they just put a lot of bad film on tape for everyone to see. Especially anyone who's got a quarterback is going to look at that and just lick their chops.
I was going to say, as I was looking through the box score, just seeing that the defense gave up 520 yards to Rhode Island, and 408 of those through the air. Do you attribute a lot of that to the scheme, or is there maybe a weaker secondary concern there? I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that Georgia State defense a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it was just scheme and familiarity with things, because I went back and rewatched the game a couple days ago, and there were certain plays where like a guy would go to the wrong zone, or like double up where someone else was, or just forget his assignment, or like see the action and lose a little bit of contain on what he was supposed to be doing. And that's where you had some of these big plays happen. The cornerbacks, I think actually, Gavin Pringle was the one who had the pick 6. He also had a pass breakup at the goal line. And the next play was an interception by another player. And so the secondary lost a couple of pieces. I think you feel pretty okay there, provided you clean up some of this stuff. But Chad Staggs really wants to heat up the quarterback. He's going to blitz a lot, and you saw that. And it's something that the Georgia State fans have actually really wanted from a defensive scheme, to be more aggressive. Fuqua, the last DC, was very much a vanilla-based defense. He wasn't sending extra guys that often. So ironically, I think it is what people wanted to see, but it wasn't executed to the fullest. Aside from the lining up stuff, aside from the stuff I already mentioned, the pressure just wasn't getting home. They were sending, 5 guys, 6 guys, and not getting into quarterback. And some of that was a smart quarterback, experienced quarterback getting the ball out quick. But I think the biggest thing that's going to make everyone look better on the defense is if they're sending blitzes, that those blitzes get home more often, or at least affect the play more often. Because when you had that many guys coming at the quarterback and they weren't getting home, the safeties, the secondary was just on an island. And so that contributed, I think, in addition to just lapses in individual moments.
I think that's going to make for an interesting matchup when you look at these two teams with UConn, who has strength on the offensive line, seeing as Georgia State's going to send a lot of guys, seeing how they can handle that there. Take me through the flip side of the field a little bit, and take me through the offense of this Georgia State team a little bit. Seems like Marcus Carroll, just based on the box score last week, 184 yards, 3 touchdowns, is the guy to really kind of circle in as Jim Moore is thinking on that defensive plan a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And they lost 2 super senior running backs last year, Tucker Gregg and Jemias Williams. Williams was a South Carolina transfer who really didn't get to show out there much. He was a former 4-star recruit, switched to running back when he got here and had a nice little career. It was 2 guys that just it was a nice tandem, a little thunder and lightning, if you like. But they both graduated. The one reason I think people were pretty optimistic that things would be okay, aside from that this Georgia State team is going to run the ball as long as Sean Elliott's here, is that Marcus Carroll had to spot start for them due to injury last year at Southern Miss and set a career high 164 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. And so you had seen flashes of this guy could be it. And the more the offseason went on, whether it's at Sunbelt Media Days or press conferences leading up to camp, you could tell that Coach Elliott really trusted him. And so it wasn't a shock that he kind of was the lead back, because it's the first time since maybe 2019 that Georgia State really, through one game, the Evans one game, really made a real feature back. And so I do think they're going to keep leaning on him. I think that, this will be a many-fold better defense than what they face with Rhode Island. So they're going to have to adjust and know that UConn's going to be game. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to still try and run the ball first and foremost. That's just Coach Elliott's bread and butter DNA. He wants to establish the run. He wants to be that type of smash mouth team. And so if anything, I think he maybe relishes the challenge going against what I expect he thinks is a good defense.
Yeah. And UConn on the other side there, it's a team that's going to want to establish the run and really push it with the backs that they have. So I think, again, getting some interesting matchups here. Take me through the quarterback here a little bit in his style of play and Darren Granger there.
Yeah, so it's a funny story. Georgia State fans got introduced to Darren Granger for the first time on another team. The last time before yesterday that Georgia State played an FCS team was in 2019 when they hosted Furman the week after they beat Tennessee. And it was maybe a game where they were feeling really good about themselves because they were coming off, the best win in program history, the most prolific one. But Darren Granger was a freshman making his, first start on the road. And he had a great game. I think he only just recently set a new career high past the one that he had in that previous game. And so he transferred in the spring before the 2021 season, and Georgia State had a quarterback at that point that was a freshman that had a solid year, and I think everyone kind of expected would be kind of the multi-year guy, but he kind of fizzled out, and Granger got the job by the end of the 2021 season and led them as the team won 7 of their last 8 games, blowing out Ball State in the Camellia Bowl that year. And the team obviously struggled a little bit last year, but he took some personal strides. The passing offense jumped up in yards per game. He was more confident in the deep throws, and he's a mobile guy, and he's a guy that you have to account for. And maybe more so because he was the team's leading rusher last year. He didn't really flex that as much against Rhode Island. I don't know that they were being too exotic in the runs they were calling. I think they were keeping it pretty simple and trying to keep that off of film. I think you'll see more of that as the season goes on, probably in this game, but he's a dual threat, and he's a guy that last year he made some strides as a passer and just as running the offense. And this year they really stressed his leadership, that he had taken real strides there in making it his team, leading them through what was a tough offseason after a 4-8 year that they felt was a real disappointment. And so 3-year starter at quarterback, expectations are high. After the game against Rhode Island, I asked Coach Elliott about just, he was efficient in the game. He almost set the record for most consecutive completions in the game. They're starting out a game, he was 14 for his 414. And the first thing that he said, kind of and just kind of not, was he referenced a fumbled snap that Darren had. And it was kind of just in the sense of like, that's the standard for him being a third-year starter, is that it's gotten to where it's like the good stuff. Yeah, you take that because you need your quarterback to play well, but you want him to get to where he's playing totally mistake-free. And so I guess they feel pretty confident that he's their guy and he'll continue to clean.
I know we brought up. Yeah, I know we brought up a few names here, whether it was Marcus Carroll, Darren Granger here. Any other guys, both offensively and defensively, that UConn fans kind of have circled as guys to keep an eye on in this game?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little earlier that they lost some guys in the defense to the portal. They lost a safety, Antavius Lane, who ended up UNC. They lost a defensive tackle, Thomas Gore, to Miami, and they lost an outside linebacker, Jamil Muhammad, to USC. And they're all kind of integral parts.
Yeah.
Really, we're wondering how they're going to replace them. And they brought in Taiji Leach at safety from Lehigh, who had some good reps in the second half that I think maybe he's going to feature more in this game. And they brought in Kevin Swint, who is a Clemson outside linebacker transfer, and Henry Bryant, who's the nose guard, came from Louisville. And, it's one of those like fitting things, you're wondering how the season's going to go with these two guys. And Swint and Bryant combined for the first sack for the team in 2023. And I thought they had some good plays against the run as well. I think that as they get more comfortable, they're going to be real, guys that the other, offensive staff is going to have to circle and watch out for. And maybe as these blitzes are coming, either whether they're going to require double or whether, because they're worried about the blitz, they sneak through. I think that they really looked through one game against an FCS team. So there's still time to, really see how long they are that much of a factor. But it feels like those guys up front, they kind of got right in the portal. And it was a real question because Gore and Muhammad were really, really, really good players the last couple of years for Georgia State.
When you look at this team as a whole, if UConn fans haven't watched a Coach Elliott team, take us through the play style a little bit. I know you mentioned the importance of establishing the run. Is this a team that's playing with tempo and trying to establish the run, really just try to grind you out? Take me through that a little bit.
Yeah, because of all the grinding it out, like talk I was saying earlier, you'd think it's a clock control team, but that's never really been something they've leaned into since 2019. Really, they've gone for tempo as much as they can, and you saw that some of it was they were running tempo against Rhode Island, some of it just they were just moving the ball. So it was a 4-play drive that started off the game, and it was just like they were in the end zone before you realized it. They can also are capable of marching at times.
Yeah.
There's a couple of instances where they've had like 9-minute drives where they just sit on the clock, but that isn't necessarily what they're going to do all the time. And I think, especially knowing they've got a good defense, they're going to want to take advantage of. I would expect you're going to see some tempo when they're rolling. Mm-hmm. The issue is you can't really run tempo if you aren't getting that momentum play. If you're getting stuff for a loss or if you're getting a couple yards, it's harder to keep that type of tempo going. It's risky for your defense because if you go really fast and go 3 and out, they just had a long drive, you're putting them in trouble. But I do think that's what you're going to see. And, like I say, really going to emphasize the run, but at the same time, especially last 2 years with Granger kind of growing, they've gotten real comfortable calling some deep shots. And you've got guys like Robert Lewis, Jakias Cradle, Talik Williams, who had a touchdown in his last game, that are solid receivers, especially those last two are good deep threats to where if because of the run and you've got UConn coming up stacking the box and there's some single coverage on the outside or in the slot with in the case of Williams, they're not going to be afraid to pull a play action and try and shoot one over the top and catch UConn just looking at the backfield and trying to make a read on the run.
I'll wrap with this one for you. I know it's only been one game, so and again against an FCS opponent, but what are your expectations for this team for the rest of this season here?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think if you look at these two fan bases going into this game, I don't know if a association soccer metaphor will go if you're a soccer guy or not, but kind of like how you call it like a 6-pointer in like the Premier League or like where two teams are kind of in the same spot in the table, both feel like they need this win to get to where they want to, whether it's avoiding relegation or whether it's, getting to the European spots, whatever. I feel like both of these fan bases feel like they need to win this game to get to whatever they're looking for. And I don't think either of them are wrong. Like, I think it is a win that if you look at their schedules, it'll really behoove each team. But look, if Georgia State wins this game and they win next week at Charlotte, which is another winnable game, I think it's the first 3-0 start they've ever had as a program. And it'll be a big difference to the last couple of years where they've started out 1-4, 0-4. And it's hard to come back from that type of mountain. The Sun Belt's not easy, but if you go 3-0 this start, I think that there's 3 wins in there in conference. And so I really don't think, even though last year was a disappointment, that a bowl game is out of reach. I think you're going to need to see some more consistency from the defense to really bank on that. Although the one thing they have going for them is there's not that many teams in the Sun Belt, or even including UConn and Charlotte, that are going to necessarily be as interested in going downfield all the time as much. I mean, obviously, you show that performance, you're going to get teams' best looks in the passing game, but I think that asking for a bowl is not an unrealistic ask. And I think it's kind of necessary because there's a bowl streak going 2019, 2020, 2021. It ended last year. And this is this far into a tenure for a coach, back-to-back losing seasons kind of portends like, I don't know, this feels like it's going to be it. And so it's kind of a mix of like, I think the expectations when you look at the schedule, like there are 6 winnable games at least. And it's also like, you're going to need to find those games no matter what they are.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting way to look at things. And I definitely agree with your point on both of these fan bases, kind of seeing this game as a game that they have to really move forward and go towards those goals that they're looking for. So, Brady, I really appreciate the time and enjoy the game on Saturday. And thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.